Hey guys, it's Mizzy, and I'm a mixed girl in a mixed up world. I'd like to introduce my guest for tonight. It is Jayden Butts. He is related to me, but we've actually never met. He is my sister in law's nephew. So, welcome, Jayden. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good actually. Got a lot going on now that the
I
semester's
appreciate
starting
you
back
doing
up.
this because, especially since we've never met.
Yeah. No,
Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
well, I'm 20. I'm actually going to college right now for applied mathematics at
Nice.
Wentworth. So that's interesting. It's been fun. It's also stepping out of the bubble that is Scarborough, Maine has been
Yeah.
probably more revealing and more valuable than the actual college education itself.
Yeah.
So that's I guess that's really all there is to me right now.
Sometimes that education is more educational than
Yeah,
um, but that's why a lot of people the experience of going to college is um, really good. I didn't get to go stay at college, but I went to a community college, and
hmm.
I learned a lot by going to college. I didn't think I would, but you learn a lot more than about yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
There's definitely value in going to a place where there's a bunch of people that are just your age, all kind of also trying to figure out the world, and
yeah,
all doing it in the same place and being able to mingle and get to know each other in that process. It's definitely helpful in figuring out the world as it spirals out around you.
definitely. Um, so, did you grow up in Maine?
Yeah, I've been here my whole life.
Oh, nice. Um, so growing up in Maine, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. You're mixed, right?
Yes.
Your mother's white and your dad's black.
Hmm.
Um, I asked this of your aunt because um, you're mixed, your cousins are mixed, my brother's black or mixed. So it's like your family is pretty progressive when it comes to intermingling. So
Yeah.
what do you think makes your family, especially your grandparents, so progressive for to feel like that their daughters could go out into the world and feel comfortable about dating black men?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I think it's just that they've really always trusted all the kids to figure out life for themselves, and more first and foremost, they just want them to be happy.
Yeah.
So whatever or whoever that is that makes them happy is kind of what I think they want to see for them. So however those cards fall, I guess is how they fall.
Yeah. I think that's great, especially being from Maine. I mean, Maine is such a white state, like,
Yeah,
and
second
it's
place
like,
after Vermont.
yeah, it's like it's definitely. I mean, people think the South when they think of white states. No, Maine and like Vermont are very, very white states, and New Hampshire is too.
Yeah,
Um, like, I mean, once you get down to Massachusetts, there's a lot more integration, but especially like Maine and Vermont, it's just,
northern New England is really.
yeah. So growing up in Maine, did you deal with any racism or anything like that?
Um, Not that I know of, because it's actually funny. I did not know that I was mixed because my dad was kind of so far removed from the picture. I didn't know I was mixed until like second grade. Um, when they would always have the paint your scarecrow, like if you have blue eyes, do this, if all that. And my mom asked me, "Why did you make your scarecrow white?" As then I genuinely thought at the time that I was white. She's like, "Oh no, you're half black." So I honestly, before that point, I think because I also I'm very clearly darker, but like not out of the norm, I guess, for just dark pigmented skin. So I never really thought of myself as black, and therefore I never brought that out around
Yeah.
other people. So I guess unless other people knew beforehand, then they really wouldn't have had a way to know. So I didn't really deal with any racism until, and also in Scarborough Middle School, there were like four kids that had any color, and they were almost treated as cooler because of that.
Wow.
literally in a school of a few hundred, like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
That's kind of cool and interesting, because I was not treated like that. I got on the opposite end. My first day of first grade was horrible.
Mhm.
But and Daryl and I had completely opposite experiences. But also our personalities are different. So Daryl's very, the way him and I talked about when I interviewed him, we talked about how Daryl will walk in a room and be like, who can I make friends with? Me, I walk in the room and I'm like, who do I have to look out for? Like, I
Yeah.
see in the room to know like what's going on. Daryl just walks in the room. He's like, hey, what's going on, everybody? And like our personalities are totally different.
Yeah, I like to think of myself as like, in a room full of strangers, I try to be the one that someone would come to first. Like, I try to be the most open and inviting person in a room, I guess, if that makes sense.
That's
Because
great to
I
be.
want to talk to people and get experiences and figure out what other people have to say, because there's always something to learn. So
Yeah. I love doing that. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm
yeah,
trying to get everybody's experience. And I'm very wary of people, but I love talking. I'm a talker. So I
Mhm.
love meeting people, meeting new people, and getting everybody's experience. So that's a great way to be, because you learn about what you want to, where you want to go in life and what you want to change, or what things you don't want to be, and just how
Yeah,
other people's experiences are. So that's awesome.
and it's a one of my favorite quotes is actually from Bill Nye, and he just says, "Every single person in the world knows something that you don't." Like there's no one in the world that you know everything they do and more. It's everyone has something that they can contribute,
That's so
and
true.
it's always worth figuring what that is.
Yeah, that's so true.
Even if it's just a different worldview, like being exposed to other people that see issues as fundamentally differently. Like I've gotten a lot into politics lately, so there's a lot of people looking at the same issue with the same facts and coming to entirely different
Yeah.
conclusions. And you can't really get mad at anyone for that, because what brought them to that conclusion is entirely their own, and it's something that they're entitled to draw those opinions from. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting world of navigating, well, why do you think that way?
Yeah.
But yeah, I really think that everyone has something to contribute.
Yeah. I mean, that's what life is about, learning and growing. And we're supposed to learn and grow with each other. Growing up, and you never stop learning. Even you could be
Yeah.
98 and still learn and grow. So that's great that you seek knowledge from other people. Um, since you got older, have you noticed more in the aspect of racism?
So I've definitely picked up on a lot more. No, again, nothing really directed towards me. I've only had one real experience um, regarding racism while I was working at Best Buy, where I was following another employee around because I was trying to learn a different department. And one of the customers that he worked with actually requested multiple times that I leave and it just
Oh, wow.
be the two of them. And then at some point later in the conversation, that person put their right arm up and said "Hail Trump." So yeah, I don't know. It's just, and like I talked to my manager about it later, and he said, had I known any of this was happening, I would have immediately expelled him from the store. So
Yeah.
it was nice to know that I also had that support had I needed it. But
Yeah.
I was lucky that the employee was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not gonna send him off. He's gonna be here." Like, so it's just kind of no one really took his BS on that, which was nice.
That's good. It's always good to have support of your managers when in those instances. Um, since you're in college, and you said you've gotten into politics, have you discussed anything like that with other people? Like, the reason why I started this channel is because of what happened with George Floyd. And I've always been into standing up for other people and standing up for diversity and issues, but because of my health, I'm not able to be out in the world protesting and things like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start a platform where I could talk to people like you and get other people's opinions and stories. And since you've been in school, have you talked about like what happened with George Floyd, and how did you feel like when, like I said, the reason why I started this was because what happened with George Floyd, I was like, I need to try to change something. If I can get people to share because if you humanize people, people's opinions sometimes change. So
Yeah.
what did your peers think about you, and your peers think about what happened with George Floyd?
So for me personally, at least, it was disgusting what happened, and it was like the video was disgusting. But I think the saddest part is that I was not the least bit surprised. There was absolutely no shock to me that it had happened, because it was like the only difference to me was that this one was caught on camera,
Yeah.
which is the saddest part of all of it, is that the fact that a person was killed on camera by people that are there to serve and protect, with people surrounding the situation, screaming, begging them to stop, and it just the cries were falling on deaf ears. Like, the fact that it was recorded, I think, struck a chord with a lot of people, including the people around me. Like, seeing it happen is what really kind of woke them up in a way of like, wow,
Yeah.
there's no wiggle room on this one. They can't pull the, oh, he might have had a gun. They can't pull the, oh, he may have been acting in a criminal manner. No, this was a person on his face begging for his life,
Mm-hmm.
with two officers on him. This, and that, no matter what, even regardless of what the situation was, he should not have, his sentence shouldn't have been a death sentence.
Yeah.
There was no court to decide anything on the situation. They decided in that moment, no, you're sentenced to death right now. So that, I think, is what really woke up a lot of America, including the people around me, to this is happening. This is not just a he said, she said situation. We all get to see it.
Yeah.
And that's what struck a chord with a great percentage of like America.
Did you participate in any protests or anything like that?
For sheer transportation, because I really can't get around. I don't have my license yet. I'm working on that, but I just can't really drive out to get anywhere. I would have, but also for me, a lot of these issues, I, I I try to inform people as much as possible that just have entirely ignorant views on things. Not even like they're outwardly trying to like have these opinions. It's just they simply don't know the underlying factors that lead into things. A lot of that, like institutional racism, the way the schools are structured and how that affects people of color, stuff like that, where people just might not have like, I fully understand that not everyone has a reason to understand those issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's when they have no reason to understand and they don't understand, but then they make statements and claims about those issues that I'm like, well,
Yeah.
hold on,
Yeah.
let's take a look at that and why that happens. So stuff like that is important to me, but I'm much more on the side of educating. Like, I consider educating to be its own form of activism in a way.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If I can teach one person why things happen, then they can teach other people why
Yeah.
things happen. And I've always loved learning, and hand in hand with that, I've always loved teaching. Like, as long as I've been able to learn things in school, I've been teaching other people that didn't understand them. So I guess teaching is something that kind of comes naturally to me. So
Mm-hmm.
to have a little bit more understanding of these issues and being able to talk to people that don't, it's it's a really good feeling for me to know that, oh, this person has come away with a different perspective, that like, you're in a state that's 95% white. I'm not going to expect you to understand these inner city schooling issues. You have no reason to. I can't expect you to do that. I shouldn't expect you to. But
Yeah.
now you do, because I've given you some of this information and I think you're better for it. You now know a bit more about the claims you're making. So
Yeah. I think that's part of the problem too. I think some people are just pure, like, flat out, KKK, skinhead, Nazis. There's nothing we can do about them because
Capitol Riot.
they're lost causes. Well, hopefully they'll come to some sort of light at some point in their life. But there are people who just they have never met a Black person or any other person of a different race, so they assume what they get through media or whatever how they view people of different races. That's They don't understand what people's actual struggles are or how life really is for them. They don't understand, like you said, the institutional racism and the way, like, just how history has been, like redlining and, Reconstruction and Jim Crow and all these things throughout history that have done through for I'm just talking about like the Black community, not even getting into the other races that have continued to make it difficult for the Black race to thrive in this country. And when you educate somebody, they finally realize, oh, I didn't know that. And they don't realize that because I know for myself, like growing up in my town, when I met a lot of parents of kids who they wouldn't expect to see a little Black girl come into their house. And they were nervous when I came to the door at first. And then when I left, they were always like, she can come back to my house anytime, because I educated them that not all Black kids are the way that they see kids in their head.
Yeah.
You educate people on the way people really are, because people think that we're a certain way because that's what the media portrays. And educating ignorant people, not ignorant as in KKK and skinheads and those ignorant, but as an ignorant not knowing, because people just sometimes don't know.
Yeah. And like going back to that redlining and Jim Crow, one of my like most hated arguments that I hear people bring up when it comes to how the races are currently in the economy and how income works and how it's distributed is redlining. That was 3 generations ago. This is now. And it's like you think something that detrimental 3 generations ago is just going to dissipate by now. Like, you don't think that the situations of being forced into low income housing in these poor regions with poor schooling, you don't think that affected our grandparents and how they could set up intergenerational wealth?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a really bad argument that, oh, that was forever ago. This is now. Like everything in history just only affects the era that it was happening in. Like, no, it's the butterfly effect. These things will only get bigger with time.
Yeah. I mean, it's still going on. I mean, look what happened with the what was it, the crash back in, what was it, 2000, and when Obama came in.
Yeah.
That crash, a lot of that was happening, that banks were giving a lot of Black families loans that they could not afford. So that contributed to a lot of that crash. So they were selling mortgages to families that they knew they couldn't afford them. So it's like, it's still continue. I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's a different game, but it's still those things are still continuing to happen, and it still perpetuates this issue that keeps Black people down.
Yeah, and I like earlier today, I try and keep my news as diverse as possible because, like, to be fair, if you have MSNBC on and that's your only source of news, you're in some ways just as bad as the people that exclusively watch Fox News for all their content. Like, I think it's important to get a diverse spread of sources to hear what everywhere on the political spectrum has to say about something. But I was tuning into Fox News today, and they were talking about Biden's immigration bill. And when they mentioned the immigration bill, I found it interesting that the very first thing they mentioned was, and how much is it going to cost you? Because immediately their largely white base is now associating immigration with us paying money.
Yeah.
So it's just everything from media to education to textbooks is all slowly just giving these subtle like correlations between immigration or minority and cost, minority and danger, minority and inferior in different ways, that it's like it's really hard to pick up on that unless you're looking for it. Like
Yeah.
no one watching Fox News is going to say, well, that's interesting that they brought up the cost before anything else. No, they're going to listen to that. And that's
Yeah.
just going to be another subtle line that's drawn in their head subconsciously. So
I agree with you. Like I am MSNBC watcher, but if they say something on there, I'll look up where their source is, and then I'll go to see if anybody else is reporting it, because if nobody else is reporting it, that makes no sense. And then I'll research it myself. You can't, like you said, you
yeah,
can't just say, oh, well, this person said it, so it's true. Because I mean, there's so many things out, you never know what's going on, that what's being reported is 100% accurate. There's always a bias in there trying to push things from the narrative that they're trying to portray.
yeah, like fact-based reporting has become more and more rare as news stations battle to figure out how can we take this one headline that everyone has and make people come to us first. So of course there's going to be sensationalism. There's going to be crazy, like out of proportion claims and statements,
Mm-hmm.
because their first goal before anything else, rather than where it should be, which is informing the people, their first goal is making sure the people listen to them first. And if you have a, like, let's say Tesla's stock is rising, if you say, hey, Tesla's stock is rising versus this new stock is going to blow all the other ones out the water, which one are you going to read first? It's a simple
Yeah.
choice, and unfortunately that's where the money incentive is. Like there's no incentive for objective reporting. Like no one pays more for the more correct source. It's we pay for what gets the most views.
Yeah. It's not like back in the day, even before me, news stations, there was only like 3 channels. So, and they all had the same news. So even if you were watching like one of the other stations, you were getting pretty much the same information. It was just told it's not like it is now. You might get something from CNN and then you turn it to MSNBC. It's slightly different. Then you turn it to Fox News and you're like, wait a minute, that's totally.
Are we in the same planet?
Yeah. What? So it's like, it's now that the media has turned into money instead of facts. So it's,
I think one of the easiest spots to see it is what the reporters, what their questions are, what the news anchors' questions are to their guests. Is I remember a while ago I was watching the Newsmax happened to be one of the free channels on the Samsung TV. So if the TV ever reset, it would just go to Newsmax.
mm-hmm.
And I was listening to these reporters, and every question they said were like, "What do you feel about these outrageous claims from the Democrats against this very justifiable and glorious thing that Donald Trump did?" I was like, "Well, that's hardly a question. That's a statement you're feeding them to say back to you." Like, and like CNN, I watched it happened on CNN too, where they prefaced an action that President Trump did as disgusting and outrageous. It's like, sure, a majority of people would see it as outrageous, but if you say that, you've already tainted whatever answer you're going to get.
Yeah.
So it's just that questions have become less of a question and more of a, I'm going to give you exactly how I want you to respond with the words I'm using in the question. And if you don't match my tone, you're going to seem weird. So you may as well just match the energy I'm giving you. So it's just all around become less about the content and more about like how it's delivered.
Well, it's also because a lot of the shows, it's tough because a lot of the shows are kind of blended. They're not quite news shows, they're opinion shows that are supposed to be portrayed as news shows. So you think you're watching a news show, but then you have all these opinions, but then you also have news within there. So you're like, which is it? So it's tough because there's so much propaganda out there, and you don't know which company is blowing smoke in your face because they're all
exactly. It's just everyone has their own angle they're trying to push. It's just a matter of is your average American going to go to the 5 sources it takes on a single story to gather enough information to say, no, this is what's common in all of them. This is what each of them are putting out. No, you can't expect that.
No, they don't.
Like I dedicate at least 2 hours a day to just watching and reading news, at least 2 hours. So I have that time to dissect, well, here's what's actually being said.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of Americans aren't going to sit down for 2 hours to read and watch and critically think about what sources can be trusted when they can just flip the television on and someone in a suit that seems intelligent can say it to them.
Yeah.
Like, that's all they need is, oh, well, this person, why would they lie? That's their job. It's their job to say the news. Why would they lie? It's just one of those passive assumptions that's made that's really dangerous. And it's getting more dangerous because I think the people in those positions are becoming more and more aware of how strong that assumption is. That whatever I say, they're going to treat like gospel truth. So I think it's always gotten to the heads of media, but I think it's getting there more so now in that every channel has their base and they're like, all right, this is what we need to spin to our base. This is what we want our base to go out into the streets and scream at each other for. And it's just different news stations are arming their viewers with different weapons in the form of stories and clickbait headlines.
We've become so polarized in this country, and I mean, it's gotten to the point where, I mean, look what happened last week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's like we've lost our minds. Our country has lost its mind, and it's like we can't even. It's worse than, you know, like how everybody jokes where, you know, they have that crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. No, it's like everybody at the Thanksgiving table is crazy because nobody wants to sit and talk anymore. Nobody wants to sit and have a normal conversation where it's a debate. No, everybody wants to scream at each other and not listen. Everybody thinks their opinion's more than what it is.
People like Representative Matt Gaetz from Florida, my favorite representative in the House, always has been, saying stuff like, actually, that was Antifa that had infiltrated the MAGA movement, and they were the ones that stormed into the Capitol, even though time after time, arrest after arrest, they have been linked to prominent QAnon and Proud Boy figures. Like, no, these are not Antifa infiltrators. They wouldn't, an Antifa member wouldn't be caught dead there because they would be dead there. Like, it would have been an actual danger to their health and safety to attend. They're not going to be the ones that are up front and center doing that. And the fact that our elected officials can just be like, no, we take no responsibility. This had nothing to do with the president. This was all the left that were in this far right movement.
Yeah. With that, kind of going back to racial issues, what do you feel about how different that the Black Lives Matter movement protests were during the summer in DC and across the country, but mostly because we can look at exactly what happened in DC. I mean, they had tanks, they had helicopters, they had armies out there clearing the, you know, right in front of the White House so the president can go take a photo op. I mean,
I think there are some things to be said about like the specifically Portland and some of the ones in Washington where things got a little out of hand. But if you're doing a direct comparison to the two DC protests, well, the more recent one cannot be called a protest. It was a riot.
That wasn't
all there is to it. But to compare the two, the biggest difference is the response. And it speaks for itself that it took 5.5 hours it was 3 hours after help was requested at the Capitol that people actually showed up to help. People were ready to send in the National Guard, but weren't getting the go ahead. The Capitol Police there were opening the gates to let the protesters become rioters. This was all allowed to happen at the Capitol. Back in DC, I swear, if one of them even touched the door, there would have been a dead body on the scene, at least.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it's
I know for a fact that if that was a Black Lives Matter protest that got out of hand and turned into a riot on the at the Capitol, and they tried to do what happened on January 6th, there would have been dead bodies all over the place.
and BLM would be declared a domestic terrorist organization like that already. Like, a lot of people think of it as one, which is unfortunate, but it would have been probably officially listed as domestic terrorist group if they were the ones doing that. But it's a difference in how color of your skin is seen in the eyes of justifiable action. Like, what they were doing, what people on the far right had called the Capitol raid was people were angry, people were upset, people weren't being listened to, and they were angry. Like, oh, is that
really
is that something that you cannot say about all the protests over the summer? Because that's precisely what those were.
exactly.
But they're being casted as dangerous riots and people trying to find an opportunity to spark chaos.
Exactly.
And
also on top of it, they always say, oh, all lives matter and blue lives matter. They killed a cop. They injured cops. There's more video that's coming out where they pulled an officer out and were beating him with an American flag. It's like, what? You're beating an officer with an American flag. And it's like, come on, you're yelling at you're yelling at Black people because we just don't want to be murdered by bad police. We're not talking about the good cops. We're talking about the bad cops. And you're killing cops as you riot and go into the Capitol and desecrate our country and murder a police officer. And we're just trying not to get murdered ourselves.
And it's like a lot of the issues that well, Biden is pushing forward a few of them, which I really like. But a lot of the issues that BLM stands for would not be disagreed with by anyone. Like, we think there should be a national registry of these cops that commit offenses so they can't just transfer and start doing it again. Who disagrees with that?
Yeah.
Who disagrees with? No one disagrees with that. And like, we should be hiring more social workers and people that are actually qualified to assist with issues that revolve around mental illness, where people aren't mentally equipped to see an armed police officer. Like, you can send someone else there who will handle that far better than a person with a gun, because just bringing that gun there is going to make it worse. If you bring someone instead with, I don't know, a clipboard to take notes on what's happening and maybe say, okay, here's the situation, that's going to be a lot less threatening than someone with a taser and a gun who immediately on arriving there assesses the person as a threat.
Yeah.
Those are the issues that I don't think anyone would be against if they were put on their own. But everyone's been so inflamed by Black Lives Matter. Well, yeah, all lives matter, but the issue is right now that's not how it is.
Yeah.
So it's just this blindness to people are just letting the name get caught up and letting what it stands for just get cast out. Because and a lot of the people that think like a lot of the people that are against BLM, they know that all the BS claims that they're making, they don't believe them. They know they're false. But if they pretend they think it's true, then they're allowed to be racist and they're allowed to be bigoted because it's just their belief. They know that these claims that they're making, like, oh, it's a culture issue, that's why there's more violence. Like, that's just not true.
Yeah.
But if they are able to pretend to believe stuff like that and say that they believe it thoroughly, then they can mask their racism as beliefs, which is just one of the core problems that, again, media is feeding into, is by like they're stoking this fire, they're throwing gasoline on these fires of misfounded and like poorly based beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think they should be acting in a way to say, hey, none of that's true. Please stop pretending that it's true. And I think if more people are a bit more confrontational about that, like it's easy to say, oh, well, you're wrong. But it's what needs to be said is, you know, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're wrong. It's not even that you're wrong. It's that you know you don't believe any of these things you're saying. You're just trying to find an excuse.
And create more of a discord.
Yeah, you're looking for an excuse to be openly racist and create. You're trying to incite things.
Yes.
With these views, you're trying to bring the things you're saying to fruition by acting the way you do. If you just backed off and didn't have these views, none of these things would happen. And they don't, even when you do have these views, except for when people go far out of their way to incite and draw a reaction out of people. Like Steven Crowder is one of the worst with that. I watched a video where there was a dude painting a mural on a boarded up business. He was just painting a mural, and Steven just went up and started asking him, like, do you know the business owner? Is like, have you gotten the okay to do this? Well, I just want to know. This guy's I just want to make sure he's not damaging property and vandalizing. It's like he's drawing a painting on a sheet of plywood that's temporary. A sheet of plywood that will be gone as soon as these protests are over. And I also think that doing stuff like that creates the atmosphere of a riot. If all these peaceful protesters are walking through and the town is prepared like they're these violent animals, it's one of those things where, like, well, I guess maybe I will be a bit unruly. Not that people are actively going out there to be unruly, but it gives them, like, look at how they think of me.
Yeah.
Like, it's, yeah, I don't know. A lie told enough becomes the truth, kind of. Like, if you tell these people and subconsciously convince them that they're unruly and violent, like, that's when things are going to happen. Whereas if, I don't know, maybe the police were there to protect and guide the protesters and ensure that there was no violence, there wouldn't be any. But instead, they're there inciting and sparking the violence. It's just everyone involved, I would say, was doing exactly what they shouldn't have been in all the situations or in all of the protests, and that's what made them get out of hand in the cases that they did.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you said before, because I've said it a few times in my videos, that what people want from the police is something that everybody should want. Because I've said it many times that, you know, people should want the police not to be over aggressive. That's what the Black community wants, and that should be something everybody wants, because if a cop is bad and they're going to beat a Black person, there might be an opportunity where he might beat you. If a cop is bad and they're going to shoot somebody and they're quick to pull out their gun on somebody, or they're quick to shoot somebody, or they pull people over for no reason just to get their tickets up, they're a bad cop. So the things that we want for the Black community is stuff that benefits everyone. It's like, and I don't think people really understand that. They think that we just want all this stuff, and it's like, no, it's stuff that benefits everybody. If cops have to pay when they make mistakes or do things that they're not supposed to do, that not necessarily a mistake that they actually want to do, and they don't pay for it, that doesn't help society. That's what we want. That helps the whole community. It doesn't just help the Black community, it helps everybody. And it angers me sometimes that people don't see that side of it, that everything that the Black community is asking for will help society in general, and it'll help officers, because I know good officers don't want these bad officers on the job with them either.
Yeah, no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop.
Yeah. And it's hard because there's that blue line, so they got to stick with that officer, but because when they don't, it comes back on them. And that's a bad part of policing anyway, where if there is an officer who steps up, a lot of times they get considered a rat. So it's like, but back to what I was saying, what we want, the whole community would benefit from it, and it would benefit police officers too, because it would make their stuff easier. A lot of stuff would be taken away from police officers, stuff that they don't have to deal with, mental illness calls. They wouldn't have to deal with that. They shouldn't be dealing with that.
Yeah. And like, it's like a lot of people think that all these reforms that people want for the police is like, we're just going to go to every police officer, ask, are you racist? And all the ones that say yes, we're going to throw out. No. And like I don't remember which of the police shootings it was, but one of them, I remember there was audio recorded. And after the police officer had pulled the trigger, you could immediately hear how panicked and distraught and worried he was. That was an untrained officer. That was not necessarily a racist officer. Mm-hmm. That was an officer that lacked the sufficient training to be doing what he was doing. All we want is for that training to happen, for the racial sensitivity training to happen, so that all these things happen less. And to be against that means that you want less experienced and less trained officers in the field.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're against. You're against better trained officers that are more equipped to handle the situations they'll be put in. Like there are a fair amount of those police shootings where it is a racial bias. But like in cases like that one, where I could genuinely hear how shook up and how distraught the officer was with what he had done.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a dude who had a fight or flight response, and he chose fight, and he immediately regretted it. Like that fight or flight response should not be a response in the people that we are entrusting with all of our lives. That should be a response that's honed and trained. And that's a case where it just wasn't as well trained as it should be. Mm-hmm. And these are the things we want. These are the things we're fighting for. Is better trained police, better trained people that we can feel aren't a threat to us, but are there to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
And to be against that means that you just want more liabilities in the police system.
It'll save people money. That's one thing people need to look at. The amount of money that we as the public put into that are paying out for all these bad officers, they should look at it even from a financial perspective. All that money could be put back into the community. With everything that these officers who are beating people and shooting people, it all comes back to lawsuits. So even just that aspect people should think about.
Yeah. It's a lot of narrow-minded individuals looking at a very, very broad issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can't be narrow-minded and look at an issue that's this wide-spanning and this large. It's just there's too much to take in if you're someone who can't open up your mind to seeing the other perspectives. Like a lot of the people that are against Black Lives Matter have never been shaken down by an officer for no reason. They've never been pulled over for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And had fear that I might die in this interaction. That's just not something that they're familiar with. And again, it's similar to what I was talking about earlier. I can't expect them to understand that because they never will. But they need to be willing to hear us out and hear out from the people that have had those experiences,
Yeah.
because that will just make a more informed populace, which is always better.
Yeah, because even if you don't have an experience, you can sympathize with somebody, and you can try to learn from somebody's experience. Because if you don't try to learn from experience, you're just going to be ignorant for the rest of your life. Have you ever had any bad interactions with police?
Um, One, it wasn't related to race at all. My mother was driving. It was just a disgruntled police officer that was just being a bit more like grumpy than he had to be. Just nothing serious. But I mean, I also, again, considering I've just now really for the most part gotten out of high school. I spent most of my time out of high school on campus in Boston. I don't drive. I personally haven't been exposed to a lot of these situations where that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, no, I have not had these negative experiences, but I have heard from people that have, and I am aware that it is not a small issue. And like I haven't had a bad experience with, but I have definitely felt that concern when seeing an officer that if something were to happen, I might be in danger.
And that's the thing that people don't understand, that even if you haven't had the experience, that when an officer pulls you over, or if you're in a car, like you, actually, I don't drive either, but when you're in a car with somebody else driving, when you get pulled over, or if you're in a store and an officer comes near you or something, and you sometimes get nervous because you're like, because we're fearful just because we know it could possibly go in a different direction. So we have to be mindful of how we act so we don't spark something. And a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people of other races don't understand that, especially white people, because
And
they don't have to deal with that.
like that's another thing is that white people don't get profiled. Like racial profiling doesn't happen from police to white people. So if I'm in a situation with other white people and a police officer comes in, it's not that there will be profiling, but it's that if there is profiling, I will be the target of that.
Yeah.
They're not going to profile the white people around me. I would be the one profiled out of anyone. So even if it's not a direct immediate risk, if there is a potential risk, I will be the one that's affected by that, not anyone around me, which is
Mm-hmm.
enough of a fear to really put me off to ever being in a situation close to an officer.
For me, like I've had really good interactions with police. I mean, we had a rally here, and I had a really good interaction with a police officer. I mean, him and we talked for a while, and he was really he didn't tell me he was a cop at first, but then like 2 seconds into the conversation, I was like, that's a cop. And like after our when I was leaving, I went up and thanked him and the other officer, because like there was another officer and I picked them both out, and I went up and said thank you for protecting us, because we did have a rally and they were there to protect us. And so I've had really good interactions, but I've had some really bad interactions, and it makes you fearful, like it because you feel like if they're supposed to protect us, where do I go? If I can't go to them, who do I go to?
Yeah.
And it's hard, because as a country we're told always find a cop, but if you're
What
for the
if the
black
cop is the
community,
problem? What if the
yeah, for the
cop
black
is
community, a
who we
lot of
need to
black
find
people
someone
feel like
from?
they can't go to police. I mean, I've always felt, maybe because we're like same with you, we grew up in an area where it's different, but I felt comfortable, but sometimes I get a little nervous around police officers too, so
Yeah.
um what was I going to ask you? Sorry, I forgot what I was going to ask you. Growing up in Maine, did you ever notice, like going to stores or anything, anything like that, adults treated you different from because you were a little different from your mom? Because I know you said when you were little that you didn't really realize you were black or mixed, but did you ever notice like getting once you were a little older and you were like, oh, I'm black. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever notice any of those kind of issues?
Nothing like really profiling. There are just a couple instances where someone didn't immediately believe that my mom and I were related. It was never anything like, it was never anything bad or out of hand. It was always just, it was usually when you see a small child and an older woman, that's usually a mother and a child. It's just
Yeah.
that in some cases, that wasn't an immediately clear assumption to some people. So there were some times when my mom would need to say, "Oh, this is my son," but nothing really like nothing really out of hand. Just
Yeah.
the somewhat understandable. Oh, well, that is just a mixed child with a white mother.
Yeah. Um, excuse me. Do you consider yourself? I'll explain it this way. I know I'm mixed. My mom's white, my dad's black, but I consider myself a black woman because I've always been treated like that because of growing up in my town. I was always treated black. I was never known as mixed. People didn't know I was mixed. They always knew me as black. So do you consider yourself black? Do you consider yourself white? Do you consider yourself mixed? Or
I
have you ever
Yeah,
really thought about it?
I'm definitely mixed, but I the way I would put it is I would consider myself culturally white. I was raised by a white family in a very white town. All of my friends, all of my friends growing up in middle school are white. I don't think I had a single black friend
Mm-hmm.
growing up. So it's just the culture around me was, I was literally surrounded by a sea of white. I would consider myself culturally white just because I haven't been exposed to much black culture or
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So I would consider myself like, I make it very clear to people that I am mixed. Um, but if I had to say culturally, I'd identify as white just because that's all I know. And I'm sure that that'll change because, once college is figured out and I have a bit more free time, I'd really like to learn more and get more involved with black culture. But it's just, I would consider myself currently like, there's a lot of black culture that if someone was bringing it up, it would go right over my head because
Yeah. No.
like
It it's
I wouldn't expect my mom to force like force herself to bring me into this black culture world when that's not something that she really knows how to navigate either.
yeah.
So it's just it's out of circumstance. I just haven't had that much exposure to black culture.
Yeah. Um, because a lot of people don't understand like if especially growing up in like New Hampshire, Maine, and in you for Maine, that there's like not. I luckily had two black friends, and there was a few other black students in my town because I mean we're near the Massachusetts border in my town, and there's a lot of people who live are Massachusetts transplants. So my town was a little bit more diverse. When I say a little bit, I mean like a little bit, but still we didn't really get a lot of black culture, and they didn't teach. They don't teach that in school. You very learn the only thing you learn is slavery, and it's like you learn Martin Luther King and slavery, that's about it. So it's like um but like I said, I've considered myself as a black woman, but mixed also,
Yeah,
so um what do you think of what how do you think that we could progress to a better place to make race all of our this country a little better, like understanding each other a little more?
I think it's one of those like stupid simple answers, but I just think listen, like, and it's there are some people that are going out of their way not to, but I think a lot of it also has to do with, especially during the pandemic, but people are just really busy now. There's not a lot of boredom in the country anymore. With
Yeah.
how fast society is progressing, a lot, and especially with the economic situation where you have people that are working 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet, there's not a lot of people that are bored. There's not a lot of people that have time that they're sitting around wasting doing nothing. So there's not that time in a lot of people's lives to have those long dialogues that would be needed to really get a full understanding of other people's situations. And I think rather than, because I've done this as well, where I'm watching someone, if I'm watching an interview or like I'm scrolling through a bunch of news articles and I see an interview with someone and I just really can't relate to their situation, or can't really relate to the topic of the interview, I'm like, that doesn't interest me. But I guess I would challenge people to listen to those interviews and just watch those, read those articles that are written by Black journalists, or where they're interviews of members of the Black community, regardless of what it's about. Because even if it's talking about something entirely different, especially right now during the coronavirus, like listening to members of the Black community in the LA area right now talk about their experience with COVID. Not to downplay what COVID's like to everyone right now, but I think that'll really shift your perspective
Yeah.
of how this
I
virus
agree.
is hitting. Like situations where you don't have that experience, just listen to someone who does. You don't need to take away a bunch from it. I think you will, regardless of if you're trying to or not, but just listen to other people. Listen to people that don't look like you. Listen to people that don't sound like you. Listen to people especially that don't think like you,
Hmm.
because that's what's going to make you a better, stronger person overall. Is It's really easy to say I'm right, you're wrong. It's a lot harder to say I'm right, you're wrong. This is why you feel that way. I can understand that. This
Yeah.
is what gave you that intonation. And this is the conditions under which I would say you're right. It's a lot harder to have all those little caveats added on to the I'm
Yeah.
right, you're wrong. Especially in this flame culture we've built on the internet, where if I can shut you up with one comment that you cannot respond to at all, I've won.
Yeah.
If I'm the last comment on the thread and I get more upvotes, I've won.
Yeah.
Really easy. It's really easy to come back at someone in a combative way, even when there's really no reason to.
Yeah.
But it's a lot harder to say, "Oh, why do you think that way? What is it that's made you? What is it that's formed that opinion for you?" That's something that's harder to do. But I think if everyone did that a bit more, we would be much better off as a
I agree.
society.
I agree. I think that's an awesome way to end this, because I don't think it could get any better than that. That was an amazing answer, and we all should just listen to each other. It would make this country and this world a little better. So I think that's a great place to end this, because
Yeah,
I think
it's
everybody
really
should take
easy.
that advice.
Yeah, it's really easy to listen to someone with the intent of having a response to it. It's a lot harder to listen to them, to absorb that and then develop a response. That's something that I think is
Yeah,
a reflex that we've developed that we should really start trying to undevelop.
that's awesome. Well, Jayden, it has been amazing talking to you, and I really,
It's been
really
great.
appreciate you doing this. I would love to have you back some other time. Um, this has been awesome. And I'm Mizzy. I'm a mixed girl in a mixed up world. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe. You know what you got to do. Thank you guys. Have a good night.